Today we're looking into quite a striking story, a discourse involving the Buddha himself.
Yes, it's a really compelling one. It gets right to the heart of dealing with, well, anger and conflict. And it comes directly from the Buddha's teachings. It's an English translation of Buddha's discourses.
Yeah, translated by Venerable Kiribathgoda Gnanananda Thero. So the setting is Rajagaha, specifically Veluvana, the bamboo grove sanctuary. The Buddha's residing there.
And the other main figure is a Brahmin named Akkosaka sutta.
Right, Bharadvaja. And he's not happy. He's heard that someone from his own Brahmin family line
Someone of his lineage, yeah.
has actually gone forth, left the household life to become a monastic following the Buddha.
And this news makes Bharadvaja really, really angry. The text says he was angry and displeased.
You can imagine, maybe from his perspective, it felt like a break from tradition, perhaps even a betrayal of sorts.
Could be. So instead of just stewing, he decides to confront the Buddha directly.
And he doesn't hold back. He goes right up to the Buddha and just, well, lets him have it. The text says he used harsh and unpleasant words, basically verbal abuse.
Quite a scene. And that really sets up the core question for our deep dive today. How does the Buddha actually handle this direct, angry assault?
And maybe more importantly for you listening, what can we take away from this about managing anger, our own and others, in difficult situations?
Okay, so the natural human reaction might be to get defensive, right? Or to lash back.
Absolutely. Fight or flight, or maybe just fight fire with fire.
But the Buddha does something completely different. He remains entirely calm, composed.
No retaliation. Instead, he asks Bharadvaja a question. It seems almost unrelated at first.
It does. He asks, Brahman, what do you think? Do friends and colleagues, relatives and guests come to your house?
Asking about guests right in the middle of being insulted, what's the logic there?
It's a really clever teaching method. Bharadvaja, maybe a bit taken aback, confirms, yes, sometimes guests do come.
Okay.
Then the Buddha asks if he offers them food, hospitality.
And Bharadvaja says, yes, sometimes he does. Standard hospitality.
Right. And then comes the crucial part. The Buddha asks, but if they don't accept it, Brahman, to whom does that food belong?
Okay. And Bharadvaja gives the obvious answer, right?
Exactly. He says, well, if they don't accept it, Venerable Gautama, it belongs to us alone. It stays with the host.
And there's the parallel.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The Buddha connects it directly. In the same way, Brahman, he says, since we do not abuse anyone, you abuse us. Since we do not get angry, you get angry with us. Since we do not quarrel, you quarrel with us.
And the punchline.
We do not accept it from you, Brahman. It is all yours.
Wow. So the anger, the insults, the abuse, it's like a gift being offered. And the Buddha is saying, essentially, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not accepting that gift. So it stays with the giver.
It stays with Bharadvaja. The negativity doesn't land. It doesn't find purchase because the Buddha refuses to take it on board. It completely diffuses the power dynamic.
That's a really profound idea. You don't actually have to internalize someone else's negativity.
You have a choice. You can refuse delivery. And the discourse develops this further.
How so?
The Buddha talks about what happens when you do react in kind. He says, Brahman, when one who abuses is abused in return, one who is angry in return, one who quarrels in return.
Okay, the typical tit for tat.
Right. And he calls this sharing mutual engagement.
Sharing. That's an interesting word for it. Like, you're both actively participating in keeping the negativity going, a shared project of anger.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
You're mutually engaged in that negative cycle.
Yeah.
And the Buddha makes it crystal clear. We do not engage in such sharing with you.
Again, that refusal.
It is all yours, Brahman. It is all yours. He completely steps out of that reciprocal loop.
So how does Bharadvaja react to this? He's just had his anger handed straight back to him, metaphorically speaking.
Well, he seems to shift tactics a bit. Maybe the calmness is having an effect. He brings up the Buddha's reputation.
Right. What does he say?
He says something like, look, the great assembly, even the king, everyone knows the ascetic Gautama is an arahant. An arahant being, a fully liberated person.
The highest level of attainment in these teachings. Free from suffering, free from defilements like anger.
Exactly. So Bharadvaja then says, yet the ascetic Gautama gets angry.
How does the Buddha respond to that?
His response really digs into the nature of true equanimity, of what being an arahant actually means. He asks, essentially, where would anger even come from? In in someone who has tamed their senses, who is well composed, who is liberated through understanding, completely pacified.
So he's saying for someone truly in that state, the conditions for anger just don't exist.
Right. They're unshaken by what he calls the 8 worldly conditions: gain and loss, status and disgrace, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. The ups and downs of life don't rock their inner peace.
Self-control, wisdom, freedom, peace. These are the qualities. Anger just doesn't fit in that picture.
It doesn't arise. And then he circles back to the practical consequence of returning anger.
What does he say there?
He says, when one who is angry returns anger, he thereby fares worse. You actually make things worse for yourself by retaliating.
That makes sense. Escalation rarely helps anyone.
But then he says, one who does not return anger to one who is angry wins the battle hard to win.
A battle hard to win. He acknowledges it's difficult. It's not easy to just absorb anger without reacting.
Definitely not. It takes practice, cultivation. But the reward, the win, is significant. It's mastery over one's own reactions.
And there's more to it than just personal victory, isn't there?
Yes, he highlights a dual benefit. When one knows that the other is angry, he says, and he calmly remains composed, he thereby benefits both himself and the other.
Benefits both. How does the other person benefit from your calmness?
Well, by not escalating, you potentially help the other person avoid digging themselves deeper into their own anger and its negative consequences. You create a space where de-escalation is possible. You protect yourself, and you don't add fuel to their fire.
That's quite a perspective. It reframes non-reaction not as passivity, but as an active benefit to the whole situation.
Exactly. But the Buddha also anticipates that not everyone will get this.
Oh.
He says, the person who is unskilled in the Dhamma, the teachings, considers him a fool, who thus heals both himself and the other.
So someone looking from the outside, without understanding this principle, might see that calmness and think it's weakness or foolishness.
Precisely. They might think, why aren't you fighting back? Stand up for yourself. They mistake composure for cowardice.
Whereas the Buddha is presenting it as the ultimate form of strength, inner strength, control, and wisdom.
That's the core of it. True strength isn't in the loudest reaction, but in the most skillful and beneficial one.
Okay, so after this whole exchange, this masterclass in handling anger, what happens to Varadvaja, the angry Brahmin?
This is where the story takes a truly remarkable turn. He's completely won over. The text says he was deeply impressed.
Not angry anymore.
Seems not. He exclaims, "Excellent, Venerable Gautama, excellent." He compares it to turning upright what was overturned or revealing what was hidden.
A complete turnaround.
And then he formally takes refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the teachings, and the Sangha, the community, which is, the traditional expression of committing to the Buddhist path.
So he goes from antagonist to disciple, just like that.
Pretty much. And he doesn't stop there. He asks for ordination to become a monk himself.
The very thing he was angry about someone else doing.
The irony, right. And his request is granted. He joins the monastic order.
And does this story tell us what became of him?
It does. It emphasizes his dedication after ordaining. He lived diligently, secluded, ardent, really committed to the practice.
Putting the teachings into action.
Exactly. And the result. The discourse says that before long, the Venerable Varadvaja realized for himself the ultimate goal, which is arahantship. He became fully enlightened himself. He attained the very state he had initially questioned the Buddha about.
Wow. That's incredible. He started by accusing the Buddha of not being a true arahant because he thought he saw anger.
And ended up becoming an arahant himself through following the Buddha's guidance that stemmed from that very confrontation.
What a powerful illustration of the teachings. So summing this up, the key takeaway really seems to be the immense power found in not retaliating.
Absolutely. That refusal to accept the gift of anger, it's such a potent image.
And understanding that true strength isn't about fighting back in kind, but about maintaining that inner composure, that equanimity.
Which, as the Buddha points out, benefits everyone involved, even if it looks like weakness to those who don't understand.
And Varadvaja's transformation is just stunning proof of concept, isn't it? That meeting anger with wisdom can lead to profound change.
It really is.
So, maybe a final thought for you listening. How could this principle, consciously choosing not to accept or engage with negativity, change how you navigate conflicts? Think about maybe a recent disagreement or difficult interaction you had.
Yeah, how might seeing anger as an unaccepted gift shift your perspective or your response in those moments? It's definitely something worth considering. It could really impact your own sense of peace.